Welcome everybody, this is Matthew Trihadi, and this is yet another episode on the Calvinism channel. And so we're going to respond to Leighton Flowers' response titled Any Credible Critiques of Provisionism to my book, which is titled A Critique of Provisionism. Now, they say that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but Leighton Flowers comes very close to doing just that when he publicly stated that he read only 3 of the 141 pages of my book. It seems that he wants a quick and easy refutation of my book so he doesn't have to deal with it, nor with the more than 250 verses in the appendix that support Calvinism. Flowers says that he appreciates that somebody took the time to write a point-by-point response to his book, which is called The Potter's Promise. However, he does not do the same thing in return. Just think about it, that if you write a book review of only 2.1% of the book that you are reading, your book review will get rejected. It is absolutely stunning, but this is precisely what Flowers did in his video. His critique is superficial and misrepresents my view, since he missed reading 98% of my book. Flowers comments that the cover picture of my book implies that Calvinists read the Bible through the lens of their own doctrine. No, that's false. The picture of the tulip in the Bible means that the doctrine of tulip, the acronym tulip, can be found in the Bible. That is, it is a biblical doctrine. On the other hand, if we look at the cover picture for Flowers' book, God's Provision for All, it seems like there are two humans who are helping each other up to the top of the mountain, seemingly without the help of God getting to the top of this mountain. To me, this conveys a thoroughly humanistic imagery of works-based salvation, of perhaps Pelagianism. So why do I say that Soteriology 101 is anti-Calvinist? It is enough to click on the About page on Flowers' channel description, and this is what you read. Dr. Leighton Flowers, former Calvinistic professor, explains why Calvinism is not biblical. Our channel is dedicated to providing you with insightful and engaging content that will challenge your perspective on Calvinism and help you understand the flaws in its teachings. Our videos cover teachings on predestination, election, and the doctrines of grace. Join the conversation and gain a deeper understanding of the controversial topic of Calvinism, etc., etc., etc. However, we do not read a single word about provisionism, which is Leighton Flowers' viewpoint on soteriology. So, why is Flowers anti-Calvinist in my view? Because he puts videos on his website and on his YouTube channel, apparently making fun or mocking Calvinists. When did Jesus ever command Christians to mock each other? How does Leighton Flowers point us to Christ by doing this? Nevertheless, Flowers claims that his channel is pro-provisionism, yet is really just Arminianism in a different package, bordering even on open theism, as I explained in another one of my videos. Flowers claims that God provides for all, but only saves those who are capable of choosing him. Despite Jesus' clear teaching in John 15 verse 16, "You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit." On the contrary, Flowers' God does not provide for all, since babies dying in the womb, or others who are incapable of making an informed choice for Christ, such as people with Down syndrome, are cut off from God forever, including the 1 billion babies aborted ever since 1980. Just think about it. Is this really God? It's not all in God. Flowers claims that by God's providence, his channel is gaining traction and has many followers. But so does Islam, so his point is meaningless. Provisionism may be more popular than Calvinism within what Flowers calls the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Christianity, but numbers doesn't make any kind of difference. Following Flowers' reasoning, Islam is more popular, therefore it must be correct. About John 3:16 and John Calvin, I don't believe every single thing that Calvin himself wrote, so Flowers' argument loses force. John 3:16, as I describe in my book, only describes how God loves the world, but says nothing about how you make salvation your own by making a decision for or against Christ. If Jesus died for all, then all are saved, but clearly we do not see this in the world. And in fact, verse 18 says that those who do not believe Christ are condemned already. So why does God foreordain that some in the church should misinterpret the Bible? 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 11 has the answer. And for this reason God will send them a strong delusion that they should believe the lie. Now this verse is about the Antichrist, and I'm not saying that Flowers is the Antichrist, but I think he does spread false doctrine and misrepresents God's character thereby. God loves babies. And the appendix in my book also has a collection of verses which show that God does indeed bring calamity upon certain people as punishment. For example, see Genesis 6 verses 5 to 7, that's the global flood, or 2 Kings 21 verse 12, or Isaiah 45 verse 7, that God brings calamity, etc., etc., etc. And so now, let us turn to the testimony of the early church. Let's look at Israel as God's chosen people. Now, a substantial portion of Flowers' response deals with how the early church viewed the question of election and free will. However, we cannot ignore the testimony of the Old Testament church, since Israel was God's elect people. This means that salvation was virtually unknown to any other nation, and Flowers and even lay Christians understand this. It is true that at times people from other nations joined Israel, such as Ruth the Moabitess, or various Egyptian people who joined the Jews in their exodus out of Egypt. But by and large, salvation, meaning God's provision, was restricted to the nation of Israel. Flowers quotes Genesis 12 verse 3, which says that Israel will be a blessing to the nations, but this happens only by New Testament times. If God truly wanted to provide for all nations, why did he restrict salvation only to Israel for a very long portion of human history? Flowers cannot criticize Calvinism, which says that God chose some for salvation and even others for damnation. Flowers says it is wrong to say that no other nation was chosen to be blessed by God. The question of election can be settled with a civil consideration. But now let's really turn to the early church fathers. Flowers critiques my selection of quotes from early church fathers as listed in John Gill's book, titled The Cause of God and Truth, Part 4. Now, I do not see how you can refute a quote. I mean, a quote is a quote. It's something that somebody said. It reflects the opinion of that person. Now, it is undeniable that some early church fathers did say something that seemed Calvinistic, and another one of my videos references some of them. I listed 20 church fathers in support of Calvinism in my book, but Flowers only dealt with 2 of them, Irenaeus and Justin Martyr. But nevertheless, let's look at some of the quotes in my book of the early church fathers. Let's look at Ignatius. He says, predestined before the ages, for lasting and unchangeable glory forever, united and elect through genuine suffering by the will of the Father and of Jesus Christ our God. It's God's will, not man's will. In the Epistle of Barnabas, read, so for this reason, brothers, he is very patient, when he foresaw how the people he had prepared in his beloved would believe in all purity, revealed everything to us in advance. So here God prepares people so that they will believe, and this means that faith is of God. Now, Flowers also mentioned Irenaeus, and this is what Irenaeus writes in Against Heresies, Book 4, Chapter 29, Paragraph 2. If therefore in the present time also God, knowing the number of those who will not believe, since he foreknows all things, has given them over to unbelief and turned away his face from men of his stamp, leaving them in the darkness which they have themselves chosen for themselves. What is there wonderful if he did also at that time give over to their unbelief Pharaoh, who never would have believed, along with those who were with him? So here we see that God gives people over to the unbelief which they chose for themselves. People by themselves are spiritually dead. They are carnal. They do not follow the things of the Spirit. They only choose darkness, and therefore they fall away in unbelief. So it is not me who is misquoting the early church fathers. It is rather Leighton Flowers who is taking an overly simplistic view of doctrinal development in the early church. So let us try to understand how doctrine developed during church history. We have to realize that even though these men were close to the time of Jesus, the early church fathers, they were still fallible. Even the disciples did not understand everything Jesus said to them. and frequently needed clarifications. For example, Jesus needed to explain his parables to them. Peter even told Jesus not to go to Jerusalem so he wouldn't be crucified in Matthew 16, verse 22. And imagine that this would mean that if Jesus had done so, there would be no salvation. Let's look at Judges 2:10, which describes how the knowledge of God was lost even after a single generation. If it could happen before, it could happen again even by the end of the first century. So let us look again carefully at the quote by Calvin by Flowers from the Institutes, Book 2, Chapter 2, Section 4. Here's what Calvin writes. Moreover, although the Greek fathers, above others, and especially Chrysostom, have exceeded due bounds in extolling the power of the human will, yet all ancient theologians, with the exception of Augustine, are so confused, vacillating, and contradictory on this subject, that no certainty can be obtained from their writings. Now, Calvin knew the Church Fathers very well, so let's be charitable towards him. He knew the Fathers very well. He could recite whole quotations from them from memory. Look carefully at what Calvin says. He does acknowledge that the Church Fathers extol the power of the human will, so granted. But he also says that they were also confused, vacillating, and contradictory on the subject of election. If you are confused, you cannot tell which one of one or more views is correct. If you vacillate, you are going back and forth between two viewpoints. You can only contradict yourself only if you stated something different previously. This means that you contradict your previous viewpoint. This does not mean that the early church held to only one monolithic viewpoint, namely Flowers' provisionist viewpoint of free will. It means that they held to both free will and God's sovereignty, both concurrently at the same time. They were not exclusive of either until Augustine clearly expressed the doctrine of predestination. Many church fathers went back and forth in their views on several key doctrines. Such were Origen and Augustine, for example, who wrote 5 million words. You can certainly flip-flop after writing many millions of words. It is only natural that a Christian will change his views on doctrine over the course of his lifetime. Think about yourself, dear listener. I myself changed my views on free will, baptism, eschatology, creation, and tongues during the 26 years of myself being a Christian.